There's people, the Constitution was written in the house of Oppenheimer. That's Constitution. Well, I just want to bring something. Structurally, in this country, it is impossible for black people to become billionaires unless they are in cahoots with the previous billionaires. I'm saying to you, we are the only people in the world that has won a revolution and we don't have land. President Jacob Zuma is the first president in the ANC that uttered the following words: the land has been stolen and the land should be returned. People should make up their own minds about President Jacob Zuma. Are you aware? Let me ask you something. Are you aware that 26% of the people that was involved in negotiation for us who are party spies? But there's got evergreen contracts. What an evergreen contract is a contract that doesn't have a date when it's ending. Let me make you a better example. And they were blaming Durmiani wrongly. 10 billion rand is the diesel, the jet fuel at SAA. 5 companies, for the past 80 years, only 5 companies has been sharing that. Let's go to Eskom. Eskom, the coal, 75% of that coal has been locked in for 75-year contracts by a certain family, by certain families. But we just hear about the Gupta family. Our constitution was written in Sandhurst. That's where they wrote the constitution, under the supervision of Manel, Oppenheimer, and Rupert. Anton Rupert told Minister Fikile Mbalula, go and tell your President Zuma. He sent him to President Zuma. It is in the book that I will make South Africa look worse than Zimbabwe if you can remove my boy Pravin and Mkhabisi Jonas.
Specific families.
The pilots in our country, you have the Ruperts, the Manels, and you have the Oppenheimers that controls these people. Look at Trevor Manuel. His wife gave the whole book of Transnet over to the Oppenheimers and still got married on a farm. Just imagine, still got married. People were complaining that the Comrade Ace Makashula and them went to the Gupta wedding. Some people. Now, just imagine if Comrade Ace Makashula had to get married at the Gupta's compound in Section World. You know the media uproar, there will be there. Bidvest got each and every government department, they own the airport. You go and sit in the bathroom, in the toilet to relieve yourself. You're using the toilet paper from Bidvest. You stand up there to wash your hands. You're using the soap from Bidvest. You go in to go and eat. You use the food of Bidvest. Everything there is Bidvest. Who's these people that's got evergreen contracts? Bidvest.
Then there comes Pravin, a minister of finance who's got shares in all the companies. And then we're talking about state capture because the Guptas have captured Zwane. And then we don't speak about how the Ruperts and them have captured Pravin. A white monopoly capital has captured treasury. It's not only Pravin. Anyone else who has assumed that responsibility has been captured by white capital. Trevor has got shares. Nene has got shares. In the same companies that Pravin has got shares. Who is Pravin after all? Why is Pravin trying to behave like he's untouchable? Behave like if you touch him, this country will collapse. No. He is the most powerful man. He's untouchable. If you touch him, the markets will react. We can't have a minister appointed by markets. You are eroding the power of the president and the political leadership. Some of you are happy because it's happening to Zuma, but you are setting a precedent. Zuma will not be president forever. Let us protect that office of the president. When you take over that office, you will want to check who Rupert wants. If Rupert doesn't want, then you can't appoint. Why is Rupert not contesting elections then? And then appoint a finance minister? It can't be. Let the markets contest elections and appoint finance minister. Finance ministers and ministers of cabinet must be appointed by the president.
What is emerging with Bosasa indicates that corruption and the capturing of the state by some powerful lobbies and companies happened even as early as Mandela and Mbeki. So when we deal with these issues, we can accept that, and as Jacob Zuma himself says, that there were mistakes, and the ANC also accept that. But where we fall short is where we don't appeal to what the Constitution says.
The state has been captured by two families, mostly Rupert and the Oppenheimers and bosses. Let me explain. Yes, the Guptas. When I was young, I was very naughty. I broke into a house with a friend of mine. He went to the fridge to steal the cheese. I went to the safe. So the Guptas basically went to the fridge. They stole the cheese. I am the Oppenheimers. I went to the safe in the room upstairs. So the Guptas. So we must not come here and talk about petty thieves. Let's talk about BHP Bulletin. One example of state, I'll make you two examples of state capture.
We come into BHP Bulletin in our next segment, but I want you to complete the points that you are making here.
I want to talk about BHP Bulletin. BHP Bulletin is paying 17 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity. Everybody here pays 10 times more than BHP Bulletin. Their contract comes from apartheid to 2020. They've now told some government members, no, they've got a supplement contract that runs until 2028. That's the first state capture. The second state capture is Bidvest. Everything in this country is being done by Bidvest. Ramaphosa has captured the state. So we must not come here and talk about petty criminals. The Guptas are small fry. Let us talk about the real white criminals.
Black politicians are playing a silly game at the moment. They're so worried about the crumbs. For instance, let's take Tegeta. Brian Malefe clearly spoke about Tegeta only having 4% of the contracts at Eskom. Yet black people and black politicians are very focused about the 4%. They go after the crumbs. And what we see within that space is almost a black on black violence. We're fighting for these crumbs here and there. And you know, I want to say something very controversial. Perhaps if black people are just fighting for the crumbs, perhaps that's all they deserve. Because they're ignoring the 96% that is controlled by whites.
We grew up worshipping whiteness. It is Cyril Ramaphosa who took Mandela right from prison into the Minel family. Mandela had a house in the Minel family. The Minel family is one of the richest families in South Africa. This bastard called Cyril sold this country even before he became president by selling out a proper radical Nelson Mandela. The first speech Mandela gave after prison, he said we are going to nationalize, until Cyril took him to Minel family. And he said, hey, that's not going to work. Abandoned a radical program that he existed for since the formation of the Youth League. What went wrong? What happened to a radical Nelson Mandela right at the door of prison? When he got out, the Minel family captured him through Cyril. Cyril was pushing people, literally taking Mandela to the Minel's house. That's where Mandela had night meetings, day in, day out, with the big captains of the industry in the Minel family.
Early in the 1990s, there was regular lunches between Mr. Mandela and Harry Oppenheimer. When I became aware of it, I remember I was furious. For what must they have lunches? But these lunches developed into regular meetings at Little Brunthurst. It is the estate of Harry Oppenheimer. When too many people attend that secret meetings, the meetings were shifted to the development bank between Johannesburg and Pretoria. Normally at night, it was easy to park the cars at the back side of the building, and people on the N1 was not aware of that important meetings that was taking place there. And there, the ANC was convinced to forget about their ideas of socialism and large-scale government intervention, etc.
The family that adopted Cyril Ramaphosa and gave Ramaphosa the accent. He got it from the Minal family. So, we must never, not even for a second, think that Cyril is our solution. It will never be. We must know him for who he is. He loves whiteness more than black people.
It's not only him. I see Cyril Ramaphosa, our current president, in the same light. I mean, he's supported by white people, and we have to ask, why is his support base coming from people who've never supported the ANC, but now suddenly they're supporting him?
Yeah.
It's of great concern.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting view, the fact that, you know, he was trained by the Manels and that law firm.
Oppenheimer, Rupert, Ramaphosa, they must be arrested tomorrow.
When Nelson Mandela returned from prison, he got separated with Winnie Mandela and went to stay in a house of the rich white men. He was looked after by the Oppenheimers. Nelson Mandela used to attend the club meetings of those white men who owned the South African economy at the time. He stayed in their complex. He stayed with them. He stayed in one of their houses.
Our beloved grandfather Nelson Mandela stayed in a house of Minel's family. Minel's family, they are one of the richest mining people in South Africa. That's where the meetings were held with big capital, Oppenheimers, the Ruperts, everyone rich and white had easy access to Mandela because of the Minel's family. That's where everything else was.
And is it not because of the greater capture? And the greater capture in South Africa that we are not prepared to confront is that even before 1994, the corporates succeeded in their very clever strategy to give shares to the leading lights of the ANC leadership, such that they get recruited into the system. And that's why they've ignored transforming the system and implementing the radical demands of the Freedom Charter, such as that the mineral wealth beneath the soil shall be transferred to the ownership of the people as a whole. We think that those shares were not free, and we think that these shares were actually a pact with the devil that was signed by the leadership and corporates. And that's why we're finding ourselves in this deep black hole as we are in the country today.
Some people I know for a fact might know that I know things about them, and therefore they are not going to like me. But I've behaved for decades. I've not played around with intelligence information. I've lived with people who don't know I know about them. Because that was not what I was trained for, to use intelligence wrongly or carelessly. But these comrades have provoked me and other people. Not only them, some other people had said things. For an example, one day, Comrade Mbalula attended an activity in the farm or home of Mr. Rupert. And when Rupert saw him, he said, Minister Mbalula, when that happened, he was the Minister of Sports. If Zuma takes out remove Pravin Gordhan, would shut down the economy of this country. We must go and tell him. And indeed, Mbalula came to tell me. I said, but what he has to do with us? I didn't know that he's a member of the ANC to decide how the ANC must deal with these matters. What is his problem? I said, go back to him to say that's his problem. But he said, we'll shut down, we'll make the rand flat on the ground. Well, fine. Indeed, they did interfere with the land, with the rand. I think there is one person who confessed not long this year that they did so. And I knew even at that time it was a deliberate move. Part of the agenda.
Why does anybody in South Africa, and why does South Africa require ethical leadership? It takes a thoroughly unethical leader to design a plan whose objective it is to forcefully remove others from their land and houses. If I die, I die. But at least my people, and by my people it means all South Africans, will live to see freedom. They will live to see a constitutional democracy. They will live to own land. They will live to own decent houses, not houses that were dished out to them, but houses that came into being, that were purchased because they were working, they were sweating, because there is dignity in achievement. Many people in the villages, and believe you me, I interact with people in the villages, in the shacks, almost every week, almost every weekend. I go there, I live with them, I know what they are going through. If we are not careful, we are busy nurturing a time bomb. Takes a leader bereft of universally accepted ethics to design an educational system that is substandard to that which other compatriots enjoy. It takes leadership devoid of ethics to design the economic sector of the country in such a way that a significant portion of the nation is not supposed to participate meaningfully in it.
Honorable Groenewald, you asked me yesterday that I must help you to tell you why I seem to be hating whites. If I remember you well. And I must tell you why today. I must answer the question. You insisted. ANC says, let us deal with things to help unite the people of this country. Reconcile. Forget about the past. That's what I believe in. But there is a reality in South Africa that between us, there are those who robbed others of their own possessions and made it theirs and left others to be poor. All I'm saying, let us correct that. Not by fighting. Some time ago, I was asked, are you going to do it the Zimbabwean ways? I said, no, this is not Zimbabwe, it's South Africa. When I said, when Jan van Riebeeck landed in the Western Cape, our problems began. It's a historic fact. Now, I always avoid giving the details of the history. Well, it's not necessary. When he landed, there were residents here, in this very city, who were established here. The Cohen son. They were living here, and they welcomed him warmly. And he established himself. They were together. Somewhere, somehow, a tension began. There were 8 major wars that were fought in the Eastern Cape. I didn't write that. We are not counting other small wars. 8 major wars. There was a great track from here when there was a quarrel between the Afrikaners and the British. As a history of this country, there was an establishment of 4 republics, 2 belonging to the British, 2 belonging to the Afrikaners. When all of this was done, the blacks were not consulted, even the establishment of the republics. And there were wars that were fought. They were removed here forcefully from their area. Removed. And some of them went deep into the country, north, south, east. And the wars began because after the population arriving in South Africa grew. It is written down, it's not me concocting it. The clash between the Afrikaners and the British continued. There is no part of the country that there were no clashes. With the British, with the Afrikaners. Some are big and known, some are not known. The Zulus fought the British, and the major one was at Isandlwana. The Afrikaners fought the Zulus, and Ngom, what you call the Blood River. And the British, the Afrikaners discovered, as they call it, they discovered, they actually came across mineral resources. And the British heard this, and they vowed to defeat the Afrikaners. And there was an Anglo-Boer war. As a history of this country. Very bitter war. We all participated on either side. Only now when we are correcting history, we are calling it a South African war because we all died in that war. At the end of that war, the English-speaking and the Afrikaners met to negotiate and agreed the 4 republics should be combined, and took very important decisions. Where will the parliament be as part of compromises? It will be in Cape Town. Where will the administrative city, Pretoria? Where will be the judiciary? Orange Free State in Bloemfontein. And one of the decisions, when these 2 met, was that you will have, therefore, a union of South Africa. The government, who should be elected at all times, but the black people would not participate in that process. It was that decision, that made the black people to make a call to meet in Mangaung in Bloemfontein to discuss what we called the national calamity, that the indigenous people are not to be part of governing this country. Very bad decision on an important decision of uniting the four republics. It was that time that we said we are going to fight to liberate ourselves, to be part of government. To participate, you must know, because this country was still under British colonialism fully. There were delegations that went to England to raise the matters. We did not want to fight. We wanted to be part of the process to govern this country. This now are the activities many years after the landing of Jan van Riebeeck, who opened the way for them to be here. They started fighting here, Eastern Cape, Free State, everywhere. There were wars. And again, after many years, we said, but what type of a country do we want? Because we must be clear, if we say we want a non-racial South Africa, what are we talking about? That's why the meeting in 1955, wherein everyone in this South Africa, including government, was invited to say what type of a country do we want.
The reality of what Mandela and the ANC are going to be doing in Australia in the next 3 days is that it amounts to hypocrisy. It's as simple as that.
Gary Foley has been an Aboriginal activist for 20 of those 27 years Mandela spent in prison. To Foley, Mandela was a hero and his cause a great one until this visit. So it seems extraordinary that he and other Aborigines should now be saying Mandela is a hypocrite.
The ANC and Mandela are turning their backs on the people who supported them, and they are in essence sucking up to the people who hated and despised them when he was in jail. They're dealing with people who used words like terrorists and communists for the ANC when Nelson Mandela was in jail, and they're going to be rubbing shoulders with people who are very much bandwagon jumpers when it comes to the cause of the ANC. Now that, in anybody's terms, is political hypocrisy.
The crux of the issue is Mandela's refusal to comment on Aboriginal issues. The Aborigines see this as blatant betrayal. Mandela has a different way of explaining it.
Well, we do not wish to get involved in the internal affairs of every country.
So ordinary Australians understand your struggle and they sympathise with it. They recognise the fundamental evil of the system of apartheid and the moral bankruptcy of successive South African governments which have upheld it.
He's made a terrible error of judgment in coming to Australia in the manner in which he has done, and we would have hoped that he would have made a statement whilst he was here about the treatment of Aboriginal people.
Another long-time Aboriginal activist, Michael Mansell, was the lone voice of protest outside Parliament House when Mandela arrived this morning.
What about Aborigines, Mr. Mandela? Why doesn't someone say something about the Aboriginal people in this country?
While Foley and many other Aborigines boycotted today's events, Mansell believed there had to be a token protest.
What's wrong with Aboriginal people, Eddie?
Well, you don't seem to be getting much support there, Michael.
It doesn't really matter. All we're intending to do is to show up the hypocrisy of this visit. It doesn't matter whether the Australian government, the leader of the opposition, or Nelson Mandela or the ANC tries to shove this issue under the carpet. As a matter of principle, they are prostituting themselves in the eyes of all Indigenous people around the world who are having the same struggle as the Indigenous people in South Africa.
And here, one of life's stranger encounters, as Mansell tries to explain to a black South African TV crew what he's on about. They were clearly confused.
Are you members of the Aborigines?
Yes, I'm an Aborigine and I'm a National Secretary of the Aboriginal Provisional Government.
Enter Bruce Ruxton.
There is another side to the black question, and surely the Australian people should have that side put to them.
We know politics makes strange bedfellows, but who would have dreamt that activists like Foley and Mansell would ever be sharing the sheets with the likes of Ruxton?
Here we have Mandela, a communist, and he wrote that book, How to Be a Good Communist. We have a man that served 27 years in jail for planning terrorist and atrocities in that country, and he leads an organisation as the African National Congress, one of the worst organisations on earth for atrocities. It would pale the IRA and the PLO. And here we are lauding a man that has not even been voted into office.
I feel sorry for Bruce Ruxton.
It'll be interesting to see whether Mr Hawke dismisses the views of Aboriginal leaders in the same fashion. They've called for a boycott on meetings with Nelson Mandela unless he publicly supports the Aboriginal causes. And the chances of that?
Pigs might fly too.
Dear former President Nelson Mandela, I was only about 5 years old when you were released from prison. I come from a poor background as a black child, and I was raised by my grandmother. In 1994, South Africa had its first democratic elections. I remember people around me, including my grandmother, were excited to vote for you and the ANC government. Sadly though, my grandmother passed away before she could even vote in the beginning of April in 1994. I understand that she had meetings between 1985 and 1990 with P.W. Botha to have a negotiated settlement. Revered late ANC President Oliver Reginald Tambo, referring to your meetings with the colonial apartheid regime in the crucial 1980s, said prisoners can't negotiate their freedom. I have read that according to aged ANC veterans, Tambo seemed divided about senior members of the leadership, including you, who could have compromised the organization. He seemed to question who you trust. This, according to those veterans, eventually led to Tambo's first smoke. In 1990, before you were released from prison, you assured your supporters that the nationalization of mines, banks, and minerals were on the cards. That belief had formed the core doctrine of the ANC and enshrined in a document called the Freedom Charter. The national wealth of our country, heritage of South Africans, shall be restored to the people. The mineral wealth beneath the solid, the bank's monopoly industries, shall be transferred to the ownership of the people as a whole. All other industries and trade shall be controlled to assist the well-being of the people. This is what the charter stated. It later emerged that you and other ANC leaders were actively, creatively reinterpreting the Freedom Charter's commitment to nationalization in order to comfort the monopoly capitalists. The nature of the sellout. When you negotiated with the nationalists, they had intended to oversee a settlement which guarantees the maintenance of a white capitalist South Africa and of the profit extracted from the exploited black masses, leaving power firmly in the hands of the white capitalists for the foreseeable future. As de Klerk had insisted, I do not intend to negotiate myself out of power. On the contrary, negotiations were intended to prevent the victory of the black masses. De Klerk had laid a trap for the blacks into which they were being led by you. Any so-called deal made with the devils must, by default, go wrong. Truth be told, you were out-negotiated by the nationalists. Failed transfer of power during negotiations. The negotiations focused on two aspects. One was political and the other was economic. When you were negotiating with the nationalists, you chose to separate political and economic power. That was your biggest mistake and betrayal to black people. The transfer of ownership of wealth and land is at the heart of transfer of power. Hence, it was clearly stipulated in the Freedom Charter, but you chose to ignore that. During the negotiations, everyone was watching the political negotiations. You were too concerned that if the political negotiations didn't go well, there would be a mass project. People were not interested in the economic negotiations, and when the economic negotiations would report back, people thought it was technical. No one was interested, and this is because of lack of education. You should have known better. This is where we missed our freedom completely. and you sold it to the nationalists. Failed economic negotiations, state ownership of the Reserve Bank. Mr. Former President, your mandate was to ensure that the values of the Freedom Charter were implemented, including nationalization of the country's assets. Instead of nationalizing the mines, you were meeting up regularly with Harry Oppenheimer, former chairman of the mining giants Anglo American and De Beers, which were the economic symbols of apartheid rule. Shortly after the 1994 election, you even submitted the ANC's economic program to Oppenheimer for approval and made several key revisions to address his concerns, as well as those of other top industrialists. Shame on you for selling out the minerals and land to the imperialists. The outcomes of those meetings were that you could have the political power, but the gold and diamonds would remain in the hands of the individuals that controlled it before. Have you forgotten what the Freedom Charter had said? One of the most revealing aspects of the economic transition was the ownership of the Reserve Bank of South Africa, arguably the most powerful institution in the country. Its fate was explained by Durban businessman Vishnu Padayachi, who was asked to draft a document for the negotiating team on the pros and cons of having an autonomous central bank run with total autonomy from the elected government. Padayachi could not believe what he was hearing. He and his team drafted and submitted the document with a clear policy of not allowing the Reserve Bank to be autonomous. He was later told by the negotiation team that we had to give that one up. The bank is privately owned and today has some 650 shareholders. Why did you let go of the Reserve Bank and let the imperialist whites take control of it, Mandela? Why? During the negotiations, you agreed that not only would the Reserve Bank be run as an autonomous entity within the South African state, with its independence enshrined in the South African Constitution, but it would be headed by the same man who ran it under apartheid, Chris Stals. Another apartheid-era figure, Finance Minister Derek Keyes, also retained his position in the new administration. Mandela, how could you allow the people who oppressed us to be in charge of the Reserve Bank? Padayachi lamented with the loss of the Reserve Bank. Everything would be lost in terms of economic transformation. This is indeed true. Everything was lost when you handed over the Reserve Bank. One of the Freedom Charter pledges is the redistribution of land. This became highly constrained with a new clause in the Constitution which protected all private property. Failed Rainbow Nation coated myth. You have been preaching this Rainbow Nation myth to the world that does not exist, but only exists in your head. Reconciliation has meant nothing but black people forgiving whites for 300 plus years of dispossession, humiliation, and suffering. I experience pain every single time a white South African at the shop, in a bar, on Talk Radio 702, or online forum says that we need to forget the past and get over it. It is like they're saying to us, forget your pain. Some who benefited at your expense. We have suffered racial abuse, and our abusers are among us. You and Desmond Tutu's rainbow myth glossed over this pain, much to the relief of whites. Whites fail to acknowledge our pain and suffering, and their position as beneficiaries of our pain. But you were overly concerned with not rocking the boat as far as whites were concerned. This is why you are the subject of a personality cult in the white community rather than the black community. Whites in this country believe that you are the only honorable black person, while the rest of us are just corrupt, criminals, rapists, drunkards, and uneducated buffoons. The free and fair environment post-1994 is another rainbow-coated myth. Black people are not free. Unless you describe freedom as being able to vote and not having to carry IDs 24/7. We are not free, and very little is fair. All thanks to you, Mandela. The current state. Are you aware that blacks remain landless, underfed, houseless, underemployed, poorly represented in senior managerial positions, the state of healthcare and education for black people remains as it was, if not worse, than under apartheid. Remnants of apartheid and colonial economic patterns, ownership and control remains intact, despite the attainment of political freedom by you. Are you aware that political freedom without economic emancipation is meaningless? The unemployment crisis is also defined along racial lines due to the fact that in the third quarter of 2010, 29.80% of blacks were officially unemployed, compared with 22.3% of coloreds, 8.60% of Asians, and only about 5.10% of whites. About 12 million of the population lives on less than R2.50 per day, while 16 million South Africans receive social grants. In terms of racial distribution per capita income, African and colored income levels in 2008 were still only 13% and 22% respectively, whereas white per capita income compared to 10.9% and 19.3% in 1993. The income gap for Indians had narrowed, with Indian per capita in 2008 standing at 60%, with whites standing at 42% in 1993. In 1995, median per capita expenditure among Africans was 333 Rand a month, compared to whites at 3,443 Rand a month. In 2008, median expenditure per capita for Africans was 454 Rand a month, compared to whites again at 5,668 a month. The economy has failed to create jobs at a pace necessary to reduce extremely high unemployment, and the education system has also failed to ensure that equalized public spending on schooling translates into improved education for poor black children. Final thoughts. The democracy has not brought what was promised. You, as former president of the ANC and of the country, is responsible for that misdirection. Mr. Former President, what you have done for black people is that you have laid the final brick by selling out on the struggle to achieve your dream of political victory. Your dream, which has become our worst nightmare as black people. You sold us as the Black Nation for a Nobel Peace Prize, and that is the reason for the service delivery demonstrations regarding the lack of service delivery. Our constitution, hailed as the best in the world, favors the Caucasians while it oppresses the Africans. Thanks for nothing, Mandela. You understood the Kempton Park negotiations as a sellout solution to rescue white capital and for the few in power, and that such a democracy would continue the suffering of the black majority. I have a problem with people giving messianic status to Madiba, like a black Jesus, when we all know that you have failed the black nation. When I started out this letter, I told you about my grandmother who died before she could vote for you. Well, I am glad that she never voted for you, as she would have voted for a traitor. What you have done is simply continued where the apartheid government left us off and dug the holes of poverty and oppression deeper. If you fail to apologize before you die, it simply means that you are an accomplice to them. When you eventually die and meet the likes of Dr. Hendrik Verwoerd and P.W. Botha, may you have a good time with them and laugh at how blacks continue to suffer. I have nothing but hatred for what you have done to us. Signing out from the deep, dark hellhole of continued oppression that you have put us in. Yours sincerely, Youngster. A deep and passionate letter to the unfortunate late former President Nelson Mandela. And we are all here to listen to your opinions and views and discussions on this. So join the discussion down below and open your mind to new understandings and opinions.
But why was it that the Anglo-American Corporation in 1986 decided that the ANC would be the organization that would lead the white people to peaceful negotiations in Africa? Why did the ANC sell out to Anglo-American? Why did the ANC sell out to Anglo-American? Get the book Black and Gold by Anthony Sampson. Get the chapter called Revolutionaries and Tycoons about Galvin Riley, Rhodes Scholar, chairman of Anglo-American, who went to Oliver Tambo and had the meeting in London, and Tambo's first words were, "We are all South Africans." That gives the white man entitlement to the land. No land for the white man in Africa. No land for the white man in so-called America. No land. No deals. Right? So now the ANC is now in the focal point of the movement, but remember, it was an integrated organization like the NAACP and Urban League. It had white people in it when white people couldn't get in every organization in Tanzania. And remember this, and don't you ever forget it, that now that the Anglo-American Corporation has safely put the ANC and Mandela at the front of the negotiations, the ANC has changed their position that was unchangeable. They have agreed they will never nationalize the gold and diamond mines. Now, you can't have no peaceful settlement and the white man keeps the gold and the diamonds. I'm sorry, ANC, we will kick your ass before we let you sell out. Now, everybody ain't gonna like that because everybody don't understand it. They have never fought the Anglo-American Corporation for any of this, though they are the ones that run it, because like Rockefeller, they got a liberal front imagery. And they paid plenty of Negroes. Here, I told you before about Randall Robinson fronting as a spy for the Rockefeller Foundation by going out and doing the Greater Voice for Africa project. The Greater Voice for Africa project, where Randall Robinson went around to the major cities and asked all the African organizations what was their activity on Africa. And then the Ford Foundation just come out and agreed to build constituencies for Africa in all of the cities that Randall Robinson spied on. And if any of them, Randall Robinson, Vivian Lowry at the African American Institute, or any others challenge what I say, they can accuse me of blasphemy, take me to court, hit me, or whatever else they think they need to do, but only 5 minutes with them in front of you will show you they are the spies that have been holding you back. You might not want to accept it, you might not understand it. It will go into the tape, it will go into the record, it is registered before the law of the people, and the people will take their time and figure it out. Mandela is now out of jail and 30 million people went in. He is not worth it. He can take his ass back to jail. Because Mandela is the freest man in all of Africa, but the people ain't free. So now one of the conditions to lift the sanctions was that they could have political parties. So now they got political parties, but the shit can't even vote. Now what you need with a political party, you can't vote. The two reporters on Jeffries, okay.
Tina sizwe, tina sizwe. Tatwa, Tatwa, ila tatwa, laba. Good.